Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people that want the best info, but just don't have the time. Get your podcast fix with the Cliff Notes versions of your favorite podcasts. No fluff, just the actionable golden nuggets. Having this much knowledge at your fingertips should be downright illegal. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with Satori Prime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Performance Enhancing Podcast with your host, myself, Ilan Ferdman. So the contest is officially over. We're just actually waiting for the last few ratings and reviews to come in because we've seen a few of your comments that you left a rating, but they haven't showed up yet. So we're going to probably give it another week before we announce. So look for a week's time on one of the podcasts. We'll actually announce the winners. We'll also reach out to you in any means that we can. So today I want to share with you a video that I watched about a TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson. It's called Bring on the Learning Revolution. Now, after doing the Jim Carrey podcast, I did a lot of research on the Maharishi University, and I've actually been in an argument with a few people around me recently, one of them actually being my wife, about, I know our kids are really young, and this is like kind of dumb to even talk about this, but I personally do not believe in our educational system here in the States at all. I think colleges are a complete waste of time. Most of the successful people I know have actually been college dropouts. And I hear these stories time and time again. I think if anything, they've just gotten to a point where they've turned the system into making worker bees rather than actually using people's talents. So I saw this Maharishi University. I started doing some research, came across this video by Sir Ken Robinson, and he actually talks exactly about the way that I've kind of perceived this, and I thought this was brilliant. So he talks about a crisis of human resources. And what he's saying is that we make very poor use of our personal talents and skills. In fact, people never even look to see if they have these type of skill sets. And in his interviews and in times where we've spoken to people, he's kind of found that people are in one of two groups. The first group of people are those that he says endure life rather than enjoy it. These are the kind of people that, and you might be one of them, and there's nothing wrong. It just, you want to start looking at where you fall in these categories, right? These are the people that just wait for weekends. Like Sunday is the worst day of your life because you can't stand going to work. And then all you're thinking about as you're going through work is just wait for that Friday and wait for the weekend. That's group one, okay? The other ones, and Guy actually wrote a great book called Living for Mondays. And this is about people who love what they do. In fact, if you told them to stop doing what they were doing, they would look at you like you're crazy, because it's not about so much what they do, but it's who they are, right? Their work is part of their being. Now, this is obviously a vast minority of the community. Now, this is obviously a very, very small portion of the population. And what Sir Robinson is actually alluding to is that this is partially because of our educational system. Because education, the way it's designed today, actually stops people from finding their talent versus unleashes their talent. Because what they're trying to do is put everyone into the same exact system. And we'll talk about the distinctions that he creates around that. But he shared a really interesting quote from Abraham Lincoln, I think back in 1862, he said, and Lincoln said this: "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with it." Now notice, he didn't say rise to it, he said rise with it. Okay? He continues, "As our case is new, we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we will save our country." So brilliantly said. Now, disenthrall is a word that Sir Ken Robinson actually defined for us. So to disenthrall, when you are enthralled with something, is that you have bought into something as your own thought, okay? In other words, like you've been so culturally programmed to believe this thing that you are now enthralled with it. And it is that disenthralling process that actually opens you up to something new. So why is disenthrall so important? It's because many of our thoughts have dealt with dealings with our previous century. Some of them, even farther than that, they're not dealing with our current century. So he did this quick example in the audience, which I thought was really interesting. He said, how many people in the audience are over 25? And, the majority of the room raised their hands. And he said, okay, how many people are younger than 25? And he said, how many of you that are above 25 are wearing a watch? And I'd say that about 95+% of the same people that raised their hand that they were over 25 actually said that they wear watches. Now, on the other hand, he had said that if he was in the same exact room, but people were under the age of 25, hardly anyone wears watches anymore, because we live in such a digital world today that teenagers don't understand the concept of having to have a wristwatch. They have phones, there's clocks everywhere, and that's why teenagers just don't wear wristwatches. It doesn't make sense to them. In fact, Sir Ken Robinson shared a really funny story that his daughter's like, I don't understand why you wear this single-purpose device. And Sir Ken Robinson jokingly says back, well, it's not single-purpose, it's multi-purpose. It tells the date too. But you can understand how we've been enthralled with this concept of having to have a wristwatch because that's where we tell time. But if you think about it in the cultural sense of where we are today with the digital age and time everywhere and clocks everywhere and time on our phone and all that stuff, it really doesn't make sense. So how does this tie into education? What he's saying that we're enthralled with in the form of education is the concept of linearity. Basically saying that if you follow these steps, you will reach success. So let me ask you this question, because I was raised in this environment, as I'm sure many of you were. Get good grades at school. Go to a good college. You'll get a good job, and that job you can grow in and make, however much money you want to make. How factual, given today's circumstances, is that model? Not factual at all, right? Half of you have probably been laid off or made redundant, as they like to say in the UK, some bullshit euphemism. But ultimately, that model doesn't work. I know people that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on undergrad, then went on and spent $150,000, $200,000 on grad school, and guess where they are? Sitting on their ass like everyone else because they can't get a job. So clearly, the educational system, as is laid out in that linear model, does not work. We're just so enthralled with the concept that this is the way it is that, I'm surrounded by tons of parents that this is what they're pushing all their kids for. I try to have this conversation with my wife, and she still argues with me that, why wouldn't we send them to college and all that stuff? Well, let's not go into that. Here's the difference. Life is organic. And what we need to do is create a symbiotically based relationship on our kids' talents. So what does that mean? Different than a linear experience, we need to focus on what actually creates each person. What is their passion? What is their hidden talent? Unleash that. And to drive home how crazy and enthralled we are with this linear concept and how skewed it is, this is a line that, I'm hearing people say because I have a young kid. I hear some of my friends say this, and, he obviously interviews thousands of people, so he's heard this. People say, college begins in kindergarten. No, it doesn't. Kindergarten begins in kindergarten. His friend has this great line. He says, a 3-year-old is not half of a 6-year-old. He's a 3-year-old. But people are being interviewed to get into kindergarten. Kids are being interviewed to get into kindergarten today. And they're sitting in front of these, unimpressed people with clipboards who have said, you've been around now for 36 months and this is all you've done? I mean, I'm looking here and it says that you've only been breastfeeding for the first 6 to 9 months of your life. I mean, we need you to do more. Are you kidding me? This is the society we're living in. See, we sold ourselves out to a fast food educational system. Basically, fast food, what do they focus on? You can go anywhere in the world to any McDonald's and you'll receive, hopefully, the same standard. That's what they're shooting for. Standardized systems. And that's what education has become. It's gone from customized to standardized. And what we need to focus on is people's talents. Everyone's talents is incredibly diverse. And if you listen to the Jim Carrey podcast I did earlier at the Maharashi University, that's what they focus on. Unleashing you, unleashing your true talent, because that talent is what the world needs. It doesn't need another worker bee robot. So the thing that I would like to add to Sarah Ken Robinson's TED Talk is that passion. I think passion is what's missing in the educational system. Because if you can find something that you are passionately obsessed about, then I guarantee you will find more money, more happiness, more fulfillment, more balance than you ever had before. It's passion unleashed that produces the best results. And I can tell you, for the first time in a long time doing what I do, I am truly passionately obsessed. I even said to my wife recently that if it wasn't for you and the kids, I'd probably be working 18-hour days today. I'm just that passionately obsessed. So it is education's job, truly, to find what is unique and special and that someone is truly passionate about, and ignite that and let that speak to the world versus trying to turn everyone into drones, if you will. Now, here's how you know if you're passionately obsessed about something or not. If you do something you love for an hour or 12 hours and it feels like 5 minutes, you're passionately obsessed. If you do something for 5 minutes and it feels like 12 hours, then you're doing something that you're not passionately obsessed about, which is a euphemism because you probably hate what you're doing, right? You're back in that category of people waiting for their weekends. So just something to be aware of, right? Do you ever notice, even if you hate your job, you might play an instrument or you might paint or write or something, and 3-4 hours can go by and your significant other or your kid will come and like say, hey, how are you? And you're like, oh, hi. And they're like, you've been doing this for 4 hours and it feels like 5 minutes. That's what I'm talking about. So you can find this passionate obsession in any area of your life. It doesn't just have to be work. So education, according to Sir Robinson, does not feed the spirit, energy, or passion. And that's ultimately the thing that we need to deal with and pretty much create a revolution, not an evolution, but a revolution of what is happening in our educational system. We have to go from a manufacturing model, which is basically like, a line like Henry Ford created, where it's every car comes out the same and it's done as fast as possible, and turn it from a manufacturing into an agricultural. So agriculture, think about this. Every plant, every seed, every vegetable, every fruit has its own unique attributes. Some need more sun, some need more shade, some need more water, some need more food. And it's our job to start viewing our children. If this is the future we want to build, it's our job to view our children as these unique flowers and treat them as such. Nourish that human potential, nourish that human talent and passion organically, not through a manufacturing line. We don't want to create drones. There's enough of them, and enough of them are sitting on couches doing nothing and offering nothing to the world. So it's our job to create a system that is more customized, that actually speaks to someone's circumstances, that pulls out that spirit, that energy and passion, creates personalized curriculums. And I hope, for my children's sake and your children's sake and in our future's sake, that we get to a point where that is a reality. Because if not, I'm afraid to think of what will happen. I mean, we train thousands of entrepreneurs worldwide. And I can tell you the biggest hurdle that someone, when they first go out on their own, that they go through is that struggle of unlearning, of disenthralling themselves with this worker bee paycheck mentality that they've just been drilled in. The concept of searching for their own answers versus being spoon-fed. We're just creating, I don't know what to say. It's other than drones. I don't know what other word to describe it. So if you found this podcast enlivening, think about what you can do with your children. Think about, what you can do to yourself in order to start disenthralling and reprogramming your mind to allow for a new way of thinking. Because ultimately, that's what it's all about. So I really want to thank Sir Ken Robinson for opening my eyes to this great distinction about manufacturing versus agricultural and standardized versus customized education. And I just hope that you guys glean something from this podcast that you can right now put into your life. So with that, have an amazing, amazing day, everyone, and we'll see you on the next Performance Enhancing Podcast.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Performance Enhancing Podcast. We've taken this pep talk and created a custom action guide so you know exactly what action steps to take now to grow your business. Just head over to satoriprime.com/podcast and download it for free. Also, please leave a comment and rate this podcast on iTunes. It'll help us get the word out. Thanks for listening. Now, go and implement. We'll see you next time.